Hello, it's Mrs. Reed, and this is our final lesson looking at the two film texts, Black Panther and I, Daniel Blake. Today it's all about revising what we already know and what we've covered, and we're going to be looking at each film side by side and looking at them under different categories, so thinking about the genre, the ownership and economic context, the film chain, industry theorists, as well as the social, historical and political contexts. What we want to be able to do is recall as much information, retrieve it from memory as far as possible. So the structure of this is going to be a few questions for you to pause the video and jot down your notes for each film, and then a slide which goes through some of the content for you to add to your notes and recap. My advice to you is you either have 2 pages, one for each film, or you take your page and you divide it into 2 so that you can keep the notes for each one side by side. It's really important though that you do use the retrieval practice. Okay, that makes this a much more challenging lesson, having to recall what you can from memory first, and therefore it produces what we call a desirable difficulty. If it's far too easy, if you're just copying from a PowerPoint or from a screen, that's probably not going to help you in the long term. In order to help you in the long term, lots of repetition, lots of practice and opportunities to recall without the notes in front of you, okay, are good strategies. So let's decide how you're going to get set up. Divide your page in 2 or have 2 separate sheets. You need to label one side Black Panther and the other side I, Daniel Blake. Okay, let's make a start. So the first thing I want you to do when you're making your notes is to think about the type of film this is. Okay, then we've talked about different forms, like what type of film category it fits into, which genre or genres, whether it's a niche or a mainstream film. So I'd like you to pause the video here and spend a few minutes jotting down notes for each of those questions for both films, please. Okay, so what we're going to do now then is add to your notes. You might have got all of the answers already, brilliant, but you may wish here to maybe have a different coloured pen to hand to add to your notes. And let's see how much you got and whether there's anything new to add. So I put down here that Black Panther is classed as a high concept film. We might also have referred to it as a big budget Hollywood movie. In terms of genre, well, it's mainly a superhero and from the sci-fi genre too. And it's definitely a mainstream film. For I, Daniel Blake, well, this is an indie film. So an independent film. It's much lower in terms of budget. And it has a very different genre. The film is classed as social realist or social realism. And we might also see Ken Loach as an auteur director. We might be led to think that this is a niche film, in actual fact, because of its success and popularity and because of how renowned and well-known Ken Loach is. It is actually classed still as a mainstream film. Okay, it's really worthwhile thinking here if there's a keyword that's come up in this and you think, no, I'm not too sure of that term. If it was me at this stage, I would highlight it or put a circle around it so that once I finish my notes today, I can come back and revise that term. Okay, next up is ownership. Put your knowledge to the test. Can you remember who directed each film? Which production company or companies made them? Is this a conglomerate or a co-production? And what do we know about how they are integrated? Pause the video and make notes on what you can recall from memory now. Right, grab a different coloured pen and let's add to those notes. So for Black Panther, you should have had Ryan Coogler as the director. That the production company is Marvel under Walt Disney Studios. That yes, Disney is a global conglomerate. In fact, you may have mentioned that it is one of the big five. It holds a huge amount of power and monopoly within the film industry. As for integration, well, Disney is both vertically and horizontally integrated, so you could mention either. However, vertical integration means they have full control over all stages of the film chain. They can do all the work of production, distribution, marketing, all in-house, and it enables Disney to use synergy to promote its products. You may have mentioned horizontal integration, and that's absolutely fine to do so. So horizontal integration is really about buying out the competition, owning multiple companies at the same stage of the film chain, and that is important too to understanding the power of a conglomerate such as Disney. For I, Daniel Blake, well, it was Ken Loach that directed. And this was what we call a co-production, meaning multiple companies or studios work together to co-produce. So this was the work of 16 Films, Ken Loach's London-based studio, as well as Wild Bunch and Why Not Films, two European film companies. When we're looking at integration, well, neither vertical or horizontal integration fit particularly well here. These are small-scale independent filmmaking companies with low budgets. That's why they need to work together. And if you remember, they also needed to seek further funding from other British cultural institutions such as the BBC and the BFI. So we can't really talk about those ideas of integration for this film because they don't fit particularly well. But it does show you, on the other hand, the importance of funding models for smaller companies. Okay, over to you then, and this time I would like you to pause and tell me about the economic context. So number one, can you tell me about the budget? How much did each film have in its production budget? How much money has been made then in terms of gross profit? And also think about risk. What were the risks to making this film? Is there anything that makes it low risk? Or alternatively, things that potentially make them high risk films? Pause the video and make your notes now. Okay, let's do this. So grab a coloured pen and let's add to your notes. Hopefully you should have something in the region of $200 million here for the budget of Black Panther. And that is in contrast then to its very healthy profit of $1 billion grossed. In terms of risk, well, we see the film as pretty low risk. We know it's part of the Marvel franchise, it's part of a hugely popular genre of superheroes. It's produced by Disney. So there's so many things here that lower the risk of this film. However, we might see Black Panther, T'Challa, as a lesser known Marvel character, up until this point at least. Certainly, the risk may be heightened by the challenges to stereotypical representations of superhero genre. We know they featured a predominantly black cast, which is brilliant in terms of representation, but potentially riskier as a move. And they featured quite a wide cast of less well-known actors. I won't say not famous, because lots of them are, but they are not necessarily our big stars in all of the leading roles. Over to I, Daniel Blake then. We know, much lower budget. This one had a budget of £3 million. And in fact, it made a good profit. I don't know why I've got this one in dollars here. I'll need to check that. But I've got $8 million that it grossed overall. And there's a number of reasons why this might be a potentially high-risk film. Let's start with the low risk though. We know that Ken Loach really features as the star power here. It's his success in the past and him being a renowned and much loved director that will bring that pre-sold audience and fans to the film. But in terms of risk, this is a very political movie. It has a clear left-wing stance, socialist stance. It deals with UK social issues primarily, so that makes it a higher risk because that's potentially less interesting to a global audience. It deals with issues of poverty, the benefit and welfare system. It's critical of government policy, particularly austerity. So those things make it a higher risk. Also the low budget, it has that regional focus, focus on areas of the UK that aren't necessarily what we would see in a big mainstream film, focus on Newcastle, and absolutely no use of big well-known names and star actors at all. Same thing here, add to your notes if you need to. If there's something that you're not sure of, a key word or term, highlight it or circle to come back to at the end. Okay, next one. This time I want us to talk about the film chain. Now, this one really is a very quick summary. I'm not going into huge amounts of detail here, so don't feel that you have to. But I want a few points under each heading, please. What can you tell me about the production, distribution, exhibition and marketing of each film? Let's go. Let's do 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes on the clock on this one. Pause the video and jot down what you know. Brilliant. Let's grab a different coloured pen then and add to our notes if we need to. So, starting out with Black Panther again. Well, there's so much we could say in terms of production here. I found this really tricky because we went into an awful lot of detail. The production really is studio-based, heavily featuring CGI. It's very high in its production values. That means in terms of its cinematography, its costume, the sets and special effects are going to be huge. There's lots of detail you could have put in about the production, the making of the film in terms of the research, costume development, all of these things, but I've just kept it very broad. In terms of distribution, Marvel Studios are the distributors. We know a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. In terms of exhibition, well, it was exhibited in mainstream cinemas, global release, as we might expect, featured in IMAX cinemas, a whole range of places to see it. It may be quite interesting to note, though, that there was some crowdfunding for this to be shown in Black communities globally, really. And the crowdfunding was so that it could be exhibited for younger children, teenagers in Black communities to go and see a film, perhaps those who may not usually be able to go to the cinema, because it was seen as a significant cultural event. And that leads us to marketing. Well, you may have noted that there was lots of factors involved in the marketing that made it what we call a 360-degree consumer event. They wanted this to be an experience everywhere you looked, whether you're talking traditional media, digital media, a whole range of different trailers. You should see something linked to Black Panther. We saw that in the marketing of different products, whether it was teaming up with car companies, fizzy drink companies. And this was deemed to be a real culturally significant event. We had those primetime slots of the trailers shown during sporting events such as the Super Bowl and the NBA. And that important hashtag making this a grassroots kind of cultural movement of Black Panther so lit. For I, Daniel Blake, I don't know what's lacking here. I seem to have not included much about the production at all, but it was filmed on location in Newcastle. Now, the location aspect is important because it's actually filmed in real places, so in hospitals, in offices, in people's homes. It features, again, a lesser-known cast. It's made on a low budget, but it has that social realist aspect, so that the lighting and the costumes, and as we know from the real life sets, are supposed to feel very real. So the production is not going to feature high production values, big special effects. That is not necessary for this. In terms of distribution, well, the BFI who are involved in the funding of the film also work to distribute, but they work alongside a company called E1 who markets the film. In terms of exhibition, again, this is important because it was shown at a range of different film festivals around the world. And this is what gets people interested in the film early on. In fact, if the film hadn't been shown at those big film festivals, then it wouldn't have, I don't think, have received the funding that it did, and it wouldn't have gained support from those distributors such as E1. We read that bit of the interview from the executive where he said, it was only when he was at the film festival, when he watched the film, that he was like, right, this is something I need to be part of. I need to be able to help you market this movie. We know the film premiered in Newcastle. That's important. So they deliberately don't premiere in London, which is the predominant place that new films are shown. We know it was shown in community centres in regional cities. It did have mainstream release in cinemas and in international cinemas too. The marketing for I, Daniel Blake is important. We talked about the idea of guerrilla marketing, something that is unusual, perhaps a little bit different, surprising. The marketing campaign could be described in times as disruptive. It's supposed to kind of disrupt your visual field, whether that is a big banner ad on a website or taking over the masthead of a newspaper, or in fact projecting the title of the film across the Houses of Parliament. We know that they teamed up with the Daily Mirror, part of the Trinity Mirror group, to provide different articles and placement on the front page of those newspapers, including a promotion to give away 10,000 free tickets. And there was also another hashtag, so we are all Daniel Blake, we are Daniel Blake, again showing support for the big kind of political and social issues that are dealt with in the film. All right, back to you. So this time it's contexts. Think about what you know of the social, historical and political context of each film. Pen at the ready, pause the video, jot down all that you know. Right, if you have finished there and you've got everything that you can down on the page, let's go through and add some more. So, to recap, the social issues really within Black Panther, you can see I've kind of condensed all of our learning down here just into those bullet points. So the social issues here are about the representation of black characters in a superhero movie, the representation of black culture. We know that African culture is hugely influential in the set design, the costume, and lots of the features that we see in the film. We might want to think about the influence of something like Afrofuturism, again as an important genre and influence on the film. It's significant in terms of underrepresentation. It really is surprising that we are, it took for this film to be made for us to have a predominantly black cast in a superhero movie. So we are dealing with underrepresented social groups and huge issues really surrounding diversity in film. This can also be linked to a hashtag trending a few years prior to the release of the film, and that was the Oscars So White. The idea that white filmmakers, white actors really were and are dominant within the industry, and particularly within film awards such as the Oscars. So that was a critical movement to create diversity and better representation in the film industry. In terms of the historical context, you might have mentioned colonialism. We know that's important to the background of the film because Wakanda is the imagined futuristic world that would have occurred had colonialism not happened. And also you may have mentioned the Harlem Renaissance, again, that celebration of black culture through art and music. Politically, then, the contexts are around the Black Power movement. That's significant for the ideas represented in the film. You may have made reference to the Black Panther Party, and if you remember, I have to be a little bit careful there because there is no direct link historically between the two things. However, they were established, the character of Black Panther and the political Black Panther Party, in the same year. So culturally and in people's kind of minds, there will be some kind of link between those two things. In terms of the awards won then, well, 3 Oscars were won by Black Panther for costume, soundtrack and production design, and it was nominated for a Best Picture Academy Award too. Over to I, Daniel Blake then. Well, socially, we know the social issues in the film are important. So this is about representation of class. Again, underrepresented groups. Representation of working class, people's struggles, people living in poverty, and the benefit and welfare system. Historically then, I found this one a little bit trickier to do, so I've got 2 things. The first really is understanding Loach as a director, his reputation and his previous film texts and the long kind of history that he has as a director, an auteur and a social realist. And that's probably important to understanding the background of the film. The other one is more economic, but to a degree now it's rather historical. So talking about the financial crisis and recession of 2008, because that historically is an important bit of background information that then explains why we find ourselves in this political austerity situation where we have things like benefit sanctions and the those return to work interviews, or the work capability assessment that Loach critiques in the film. Politically then, it's really significant. We have a very socialist message from Ken Loach, a left-wing ideology. We know he's anti-austerity. He's very critical of the government and Conservative government who put these measures in place. we know that the film reaches a political discourse, so that the ideas within the film and what it presents are discussed in Parliament. They're raised by the leader of the opposition at the time, Jeremy Corbyn. They're discussed on Newsnight. So this becomes significant as a film in the political context. And in terms of awards, we know it wins the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which we see then is used in all of the promotional material for the film. Okay, last bit then, you'll be pleased to know. Pause the video and tell me what you know about the 3 industry theorists. Make sure you do pause the video, okay? Don't just wait for me. Pause it, tell me what you know first. Okay, let's recap then. So Black Panther, I'm just going to go through a little bit of each industry and then how they apply to that film. Each industry theory. So Karan and Seaton was all about the idea that the media industries are driven by profit and power. This is really applicable to Black Panther, which is owned by Disney. Disney is a conglomerate. Disney is horizontally integrated. And Disney is holding monopoly within the industry. So all of these things make Karan and Seaton's theory really applicable. Hesmondau suggests that the cultural industries are driven by profit and risk. Okay, again, this is really applicable. Risk is minimised in this film through the use of star power, franchise, sequels and genre. So it can meet many of the factors that Hesmondau suggests film producers do in order to maximise their profit. And in terms of Livingstone and Lunt, remember they raise issues of regulation. So we know that the regulator for this film are the BBFC, given an age rating of 12A. And the one thing that might really go against that is some of the violence in the film. So the warrior battle scene is potentially a contentious scene in terms of the age rating, but it is still awarded a 12. Livingstone and Lunt say there needs to be a balance between the citizen and the consumer and their needs. So being able to choose what we want to see in the cinema under the guidance from the regulator seems to meet both of those factors. For I, Daniel Blake then, Karan and Seaton, we know desire for profit and power. They say that this leads to a lack of diversity and also means that smaller film companies don't really get a look in. Now, the success of I, Daniel Blake might work against this. However, it also might fulfil the idea that indie film does offer more diverse and varied storylines and narratives. As for Hesmondau, well, cultural industries driven by profit and risk. How is risk minimised here? Well, it's mainly minimised through the success of Ken Loach. He is the one who brings the pre-sold audience and the fans, and he is the one who is known for the social realist genre, which this film fits within. So I think that's the best way that risk is minimised. The same for Livingstone and Lunt. Regulation through the BBFC, an age rating of 15. Swearing and, I don't wonder what I was meaning to put here, maybe swearing and some of the kind of hard-hitting sort of scenes, social realist scenes, perhaps are the biggest challenge, but the rating obviously suits that. And again, same thing as the other, citizen versus consumer. The BBFC regulates to give an age classification. This enables you to then choose what you see with guidance from your regulator. Okay, you'll be pleased to know, I think that fulfills what we were doing. So we have recapped both films alongside each other, and you can see there's lots of content there. So I'm going to advise that you write yourself a summary for each. What this means is not just bullet pointing, but writing in full sentences, using media terminology as often as you can. and I'll give you a frame to use on Show My Homework for a guide. You may wish not to do this immediately. In fact, it would probably be better to leave a day or two between finishing your notes and then writing your summary to give you the opportunity for recall again. That brings us to the end of our unit. We have a knowledge quiz to complete, and next we're moving on to study the news industry.